Hey, Caitlin West, thank you for joining the podcast today. You're an early stage owner founder for a company called For Olivio. I hope I pronounced that correctly, which is where you created an app uh, and wearable tech in the health space to really help people. You're on a mission to help people, find relief from chronic pain, and it's really interesting. The health space is always growing, but the wearable tech and the apps, that element of it is like it's almost like the surf before the tidal wave. Like we're on the verge of receiving a lot of it, and you're definitely there at the forefront. So I want to hear about your business, how you're planning to market it, and also the reason why you chose this kind of sector, and specifically with chronic pain relief, to be the thing, your mission. So welcome,
Yeah.
Caitlin.
Well, one, thank you for having me on. This is I'm so excited for our talk. And to share what we're working on. But before we get into that, like a little bit about me is, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease 10 years ago at the ripe age of 25. So naturally, I did not want anything affecting me from being able to work, to go out, to, just live life. And I got diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. And that's a form of arthritis that attacks the skin, the joints, and the GI tract. So it's just as amazing as it sounds. And really, unfortunately, like I was bedridden for a few months. Then I wasn't able to kind of get back to my normal grind. And I was in business consulting at the time, helping companies go through bankruptcy transformation. So as you can imagine, high stress, high stakes on all fronts. What I realized though is as I
It's a lot
walked
of
through my,
personalities you got to deal with there.
yeah, oh my gosh, the personalities is a pleasant word to
I think
say. I would say just
expectation
because,
management would probably be the buzzword that you throw that around a lot,
yeah,
right?
temper tantrums in adult forms is always very interesting to see, right? Um, but what was wild was that as I was going through this whole entire process of trying to find the right healthcare for my disease, trying to find the right doctor, didn't matter how much money I spent on getting infusions or injections, I still was in this daily pain that had me taking like other steroids or over the counter pain medication. So, fast forward to where we are today. Here's For Olivio. So, For Olivio stands for relief. Olivio is the Spanish translation for relief. And what we're really aiming to do is to give individuals with chronic conditions a way to get ahead of those daily pain or debilitating days by looking at how the weather impacts their pain and inflammation markers. And we do so by using machine learning or AI via an app platform. And then ideally, it will also be a wearable once we get ourselves in a spot for that to administer safe and effective pain relief therapies that limits the number of pain medications one needs to take. um, so that's like a long-winded way to say we're trying to help people live more normal lives just so that they can at least feel like they have a sense of control to a disease that unfortunately takes a lot from individuals that are diagnosed.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's the mission is like the key. It's like, but I'm so interested as well. And your story, like I understand the personal reason, like arthritis. I had to quickly like look into arthritis, like, because when I'm not very familiar. I know of it. I know that it hurts when you move joints, for instance, like you could get it. My mom has it in her hand, for instance, but like, I didn't know much about it beyond that, right? So when you
Yeah.
talk about like skin conditions and are the other ailments that come along with it that are debilitating in many cases. And I know that people talk about all sorts of different remedies, ranging from just basic pain management medication, like painkillers, like ranging from like your Tylenol, paracetamol to like the way more like codeine based, opiate based, medications out there. And then you've got like, even as far as like stem cell, drips and that kind of stuff to help it. And I've read into a little bit about that. found some podcasts on it, watched those. But I mean, it's a huge. I mean, I get it. It's chronic, and it's when people are in the moment, in the pain, they want relief, and they're going to look to immediate relief. But then there's also like you've got to deal with like how you can reduce it over the long term, and also prevent yourself from being in a situation where you can hurt. Like I broke my ankle, a long time ago. I was that guy who broke his ankle on a stationary bike in a spinning class. Yeah, so not on the side of a mountain, not in a race, on a stationary bike in a bloody spinning class. And I did that because they tell you don't wear sweats, right? I wore sweats, but no one told me not to, really. I mean, there was a sign somewhere, I'm pretty sure, but I wore sweats that, and they were pretty tight fitting sweats, but somehow the hem got caught in the gyro, whatever you call that, where the pedal connects in there, and it got yanked. It got pulled in there, and that 20-kilogram flywheel that wants to keep spinning kept that pedal spinning, and it just cracked the ankle back. Of course, the foot's trapped in the horrible, right? But that was a really brutal break. And I remember asking the doctor, I was like, how bad is it? And he said, how bad is the bone broken? And he goes, well, can you picture cornflakes? I'm like, holy crap, really? Like, if there wasn't like a clean snap, it was hammered. And so, when the weather changes, I know when it's about to rain because my ankle starts to hurt. So I don't know. And I just thought that was like, an old wives' tale or something like you'd see, like, but it's true. Like your body can kind of know somehow.
That made me cringe a little bit. So I hope that never happens to anyone else. It's, the hardest part with advocating for what we are building at the company is creating, I don't want to say empathy, but creating understanding to what it feels like. Because sometimes, people hear arthritis, right? And they're like, well, just take Advil or just, work through it. And before I was diagnosed, I was probably the same way at up fronts. But what you unfortunately had to go through is pretty similar to what people feel on a daily basis. So like I correlate sometimes the sensation to like hitting your funny bone. And like when you hit your funny bone, it's just like that, like, ooh, that jolt. Or if your foot's asleep, you can sometimes get like the pins and needles. And, we're talking about inflammatory arthritis. And then there are people who have osteoarthritis, which is really where there are no joints kind of in between. I'm not a doctor, right? So this is like my way of saying what osteo is bone on bone. So, and they're the one where you will see deformed hands, a little bit more difficulty walking, because they're essentially just, their bones are grinding on each other whenever they they try to move. And to me, that sounds like the most excruciating.
It's horrific. Yeah, it's like there's no cartilage in there to separate, to be the buffer between. That's okay. There's another thought I had as you were explaining how it relates to the technology element itself, like how it relates. You've got wearable tech down the road. You're building towards that because that's from a business perspective, very, very, a very good place to be from a business perspective, but also because you can really hit the masses faster and harder with wearable tech. The margins can go up. You have you really can productize the service that the app could provide. We'll talk about the app as well. Well, so actually speaking about the app, it's you say what data points is it looking at? Like you don't have to be specific, but like how many data points is it kind of pulling from to create this predictive element, this sequence that it has?
It's pretty simple, which is amazing. So we really dug into the research that the NIH and the CDC in the States have been doing for decades on humidity's impact and barometric pressure on one's perceived pain and fatigue. And I think it's important to note that what we are pulling are like self-documented metrics. And in the background, we might pull some other metrics, right? So what we say is that when someone is coding or doing their check-in, it says like, how's your pain, today? It's on that famous smiley scale that we all love to hate. How's your fatigue? And then we correlate that with a 15% change in humidity. And we understand how drastic shifts in your environment are impacting your perceived not only mood and fatigue, but the type of pain, the type of inflammation, and where. And in the background, you know, the secret sauce or like the magic happens, and it is able to say, using the weather forecast, here is how in the next 10 days or 5 days you could be impacted by the environment around you. And here are some preventative things that you can do to get ahead of those pain days. So we partnered also with rheumatologists and doctors, and we're like, well, what are you using when people call you 100 times a day when they are not feeling well? They're like, well, unfortunately, we don't have much. If they don't want to take pain medication, we say, drink more water, have exercise. Yep. Do the rainbow diet.
Yeah, that just feels when doctors say that, it's or any health professional, it's like I feel like you're having a laugh with me at that point. It's like and I know some people, there's the argument, well, if how much of that have you actually been doing consistently? Like, what is your water intake per day, and what is this? And if you actually stayed with that for 2 weeks consistently, maybe you would see a change where there's less. It's like, okay, I get that, but I have this excruciating pain right now, and I have this problem I need to deal with right now. And that's where like people just go for solutions. They want a solution. And I guess sometimes there's a case for like creating something just for that, to be like the thing that just takes care of it in the immediate. But then there's also like the preventative care as well. But that isn't just a rainbow diet in that. So it's like what you're saying, if the weather does have an effect, and if it's correlated and it's predictable, and someone who has the ailment knows it too. Like it's not just it correlates on a chart. Like they can feel that this is true because they've felt it. They've been through yes, you know what? When it was like that, humidity was high, I did feel way more, or I felt less, or do you know what I mean? Like if that's the case, then they can really make some good decisions based on the information coming from the app. And like,
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead. No.
You hit on like a valuable part. So what we find, right, as a patient or even like someone talking to doctors, is doctors don't have time to always answer messages, right? So in the US, there's on average 2,500 patients to one doctor. And in rheumatology, that number is more. And when you think about that, when you're in pain, what you want is just for it to go away. So you're going to do anything possible for it to go away. If it's pain medication, some people turn to alcohol, some people turn to other things, right? So originally,
Self-medicate.
yeah, they
Yeah.
self-medicate. They have to, right? Because they spend a lot of time and they spend a lot of money trying to get treatments that provide temporary relief, and they get frustrated. And then when they can't go to a doctor, because not that the doctor doesn't want to speak to them, the doctor doesn't have time. And most people want to speak to the doctor. They don't want to speak to like the nurse practitioner, right? Like they want to go right to the source. They're like, well, crap, I'm just going to do what I have easily available for me to self-regulate in the time. And we have to have healthier solutions for people to be able to do that. So we're working on building like micro habits and mindfulness about, yeah, there's like something with your diet and your hydration levels, but in general, you have a chronic condition. How are you going to be able to get ahead of those days with simply the tools that you have around you that are not going to require you to take more pain medication? I will say, unfortunately, I think there are just some times where medication is needed to help manage on the day. We're trying to reduce the number of those days. And when we talk to individuals, they are frustrated with the lack of options in the space, right? And there are options in terms of like infrared light, hot and cold, which also seems very simplistic, right? Like just ice or add heat. There's electric stimulation, such as like a TENS machine. But all of these products are very expensive independently. So people can spend thousands of dollars just trying to find something when we're trying to say, now all of these technologies are also in our device moving forward. So like providing them like a one-stop shop for the daily, which is, I think, important when you're talking about care of the patient and not just treating the symptoms.
All right. Now, speaking, I mean, as you were saying that, my mind was thinking about all the other areas, like, because I was thinking about like the sciatic pain that I had also gone through, which is separate to that incident with my ankle. Like there was a time where I felt that it was debilitating. Like it was really bad, but I kind of grew out of it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But when it was with me for a number of years in my 20s, 23, 24, 25, that kind of time, I sometimes I couldn't get out of bed. Sometimes when I'd be like, it would attack me while I was like walking. I was in London trying to run to the like the tube station, and I would have to stop. Like I'd have to suddenly like move to the side because the pain just would just trigger. If like a slight slip, I'm wearing like loafers and I slip a little bit, that would send me off, and it was horrible. And then I'd be paying for it for like days on days, and then it would kind of subside, become manageable, but the pain was still present, but it was okay. And so I used to have, we used to get over the counter cocodamol here, which is paracetamol and codeine. And I used to pop those things. I used to pop them like Skittles.
Yeah.
I used to have, someone said, you're going to get addicted. So don't care. Like I need the pain to go away. I'll medicate without. They said, hey, well, if you drink alcohol, it will heighten some of the effects. I'm like, well, you guess what I'm putting this down with? All right, with a bottle of
Yep.
wine and some whiskey on the side, right? So I used to do that. I was living like a very unhealthy lifestyle just to get rid of the pain because I didn't care about anything else. Nothing mattered. It was just the pain. I needed to get rid of it. Um, but and so I really understand like the need for this, even though I don't have what would be considered a chronic, I don't have arthritis as a chronic issue, but like I've had experience with it. I think most people can probably relate to that. Like, I've had pain, I'm human, there's been problems. And you know what can I do to stop, having that problem? But then I also think about like, if your app is looking at like the weather and it's looking at ways in which it can, and you're correlating that with with arthritis, I'm thinking of my memory goes back to a buddy of mine who actually came through, he threw the towel in on this business because he couldn't get it to work initially. And it was more of a technical issue. But he used a similar thing for allergies, where he said that he tapped into like weather and like some kind of weather data bank, where they provide all these different data points on the weather. And his app would, if you kind of told it what allergies you have, or it would kind of make predictions on just generally when allergies are going to be, it would tell you when it would happen in your area. So not just generally, like in your area, it would alert you like pollen count on this is going to be higher, or for this particular allergy, or at this time of the year in that area that you're in, these are the leaves or these are the plants from a horticultural standpoint that are growing. Be mindful that this can trigger your allergies. It kind of like, it would kind of package its advice for the user based on what ailments they had or what would trigger certain allergic reactions. And he was going to try and build it up from there, but then he basically ran out of money and had to go back to his day job, and then left it and then killed it. And I asked him, I said, can I talk about it? He goes, yeah. So, but maybe there's like multiple applications off the base platform that you have. Maybe it's for all of the ailments to relieve them for that. More than 4.
there totally is. So like we started with what, and I say we, like me and my, like we started with what we knew and what we had access to. And as we've grown over the last 2 to 3 years, the amount of people who have said, your app has actually helped me even help understand when I'm going to have a depression episode or when my anxiety could be peaking. And what it really gets into is as people do the daily check-in, which by the way is no more than like 30 seconds, they're really taking a moment to tune into like how they're feeling, what they're doing, and it sets them up on a path. So it's a very far-fetched way of saying they're kind of getting like 30 seconds of like a meditation like check-in, and that hits on a whole broader perspective of like how can mindfulness techniques also help people manage anything that they're going through outside of chronic pain, like the mind over matter, put into action. Transparently, this is also something that is loved and hated, right? So when I talk to people in pharma, when I talk to people in the like, who want medical devices, they're like, well, everyone's still going to need medication and everyone's still going to need, some form of difference of therapeutics. And I'm like, there's no debate that if you have a chronic condition or if you have an autoimmune disease or whatever it may be, you will need medication. I think that the challenge that I'm saying is how much is really needed versus how much is kind of pushing just to get extra money coming in the door for the pharmacies, which is, probably going to put me on like the blacklist.
Well, I mean, you say that, and I'm just thinking about like, I mean, it depends on the lens you look at it through. Like, I think of this as like, well, look, actually, doctor, you guys are going to be replaced with AI soon enough. Like, at least the first general, the general consultation, we're already heading in that direction anyway. I ask ChatGPT about my own problems all the time. It has way more information on me than I should let it have. But it's like, but that's not just a little gimmick. That's gonna happen. Like even like the first interaction with legal and lawyers, it's gonna happen because I don't need to pay the upfront fee. I don't have to go through the process. Like every industry is gonna get hit with AI and technology regardless. So there's gonna be a requirement. There's going to be a need for businesses that have a pre-established infrastructure like apps, like wearable tech, where that AI could be embedded. It can analyze it in some way, shape, or form. So I feel like, and that's my prediction, but I feel like you're on the way. But I share that prediction with a lot of other people, right? So you're on, by going down this road. It's like it's not to say necessarily, perhaps that it's going to replace medication. It's like, no, this is a way in which we can almost remove the practitioner from the first, or at least a couple of stages of this engagement where the app can do that for it. The app and the wearable tech could almost prescribe the medication required, the level of medication at some point. You don't know. Like it depends on how involved that stuff becomes, but you got to have it's like having an operating system. We have all sorts of different apps on our operating system. So it's kind of like if you create the operating system, if you create the technology for which, like the iPhone, for which all these apps can live, now you've got a way to deploy. And that could be deploying more data. It could be deploying more services. It could be deploying more like human-focused services, like even access to different types of doctors for different types of things. You could kind of ZocDoc the hell out of this thing, and kind of implement it somehow. But then equally, if it's plugged into some kind of pharma/medical organization, it can now start saying, okay, we think you should get an upgrade in this medication. We're going to farm that back to the clinic, and they're going to double check it. And if they think it's right based on this information, they might auto send it to you. So you never know how this could start having an effect. So, but again, that's all future pacing, but you have to start niche. You've got to start small. So I get it. You're focusing right now on arthritis, and your app is you're gonna crack this market and gain momentum, and then you can open up into everything else. I guess. Who knows where you'll go?
That would be amazing if we came back in like 5-10 years and we're like, here we are. Here's what we're doing. I think the trajectory of the app is very powerful. What I also believe there's a potential path for is continued advocacy for the patient in between doctor's visits. So, oftentimes when you're asked, like, how are you feeling as someone who's going through this condition, you don't really like understand, or maybe you're not checking in with yourself. Like, okay, yeah, I've lived through a couple different episodes of pain, but right now I'm feeling okay. And the importance of being able to advocate for yourself in the doctor's visit, and having the doctor buy in to what you are saying, because if a doctor sees you and you're moving around and your joints aren't as puffy and maybe like your skin is okay depending on what type of inflammatory disease is, even if you feel like you're at a 6 on the Richter scale of pain, they're going to be like, you're probably at a 4, so there's going to be no change that I'm going to do. But if you have this data that allows you to say, well, like, look at how I've actually been doing in the week since you last saw me. And if, how does this impact your decision? Then also, it's like, if you change medication and the medication's not working, you could also just use the data to advocate for yourself in that way. And I think as a patient, you need to be able to provide tangible, I hate to say data, but tangible facts, or maybe it is data, to the doctor outside of you just voicing your discomfort, because it's not working right now just to say that
Absolutely. I feel
I'm
like
feeling well.
not all doctors are made equal. Like people say, oh, just trust your doctor. Like, listen, like trust your bank manager. Like some guys could be idiots and some people could be
Yeah.
super smart. How do you know which one I'm going to get? And they start reeling off the same buzzwords, and they reel off the same sales script, the summaries of whatever condition or ailment you have, and you think that they know what they're talking about. No, I don't subscribe to. I don't believe that. I think if you're human, you're fallible, and
Right.
I don't know what day it is for you. You could be a really good doctor today, could be your bad day though, or you could be a bad doctor and today could be a good day. Equally, you just might not be that good anyway. And it's like, and this is true. Like you don't really background check your doctor like that. I mean, you kind of just accept the stuff, and you kind of just you hope for the best. Everyone's working with the doctors, they live in like a hope creed, and so they want to believe that their doctor has their interests at best. And and if you ask any doctor, probably maybe watching this, or anyone who has something to say about doctors, they'll say, well, medical professionals sign an oath to this, and I don't care what you signed. Okay, I've seen bad lawyers, good doctors, bad doctors. You're still human. All right. So I do want data on me that I know of that helps me advocate for myself, so that I can go in and say, well, listen, it's kind of like when I go to an accountant and I say, here's my bank statements, here's what I've done. If you can't figure out how to save me tax here, then you can take a hike, because I know somebody can. And you know what? I'm getting 3 other people looking at this too. But I have the data set. It's mine. And there's a lot to go through. And I can have maybe more than one person work at this data set and actually work to the effect that I need them to. And you'd think that that would only be available in the medical profession for people who have ailments that have a lot of money, right? And yeah, maybe. But how do we make that more available for the masses? And when I'm thinking, when you're talking about advocating for yourself, I know in the US people do generally, they're generally more likely to advocate for themselves. But I'm from the UK. I lived in America for 8 years, but in the UK we have the NHS, right, the public healthcare, and there's also a cultural difference too. In the UK, you'll notice, and if anyone wants to say something, feel free to jump in the comments and I'll fight you in there. Like it's when it comes to like the NHS, like in the UK, there's a general thing where the British population will tend to just do whatever the doctor says, and they'll just accept it. And doctors will say, come back in 6 months. Whereas over in America, they'll expect more from their doctors. Why? Because they pay. Right, they pay, so I expect a better service. In the UK, you don't pay, so you kind of just do whatever the doctor says, and they'll kind of send you down the garden path and give you whatever, and then most of the time not give you actually what you need. And most people in the UK will probably attest to that, because they're just saving costs. I don't know whatever reason they have, but you generally get the sense that I'm not getting what I think I should be getting. Versus when you go to America, sometimes you feel like, whoa, you gave me how much? How many drugs did you just give me in a bag? It's like, like. But then it's like, there's pros and cons for each. But I'd rather have more to choose from than less. I'd rather have a place where I can advocate for myself and actually have it heard. Whereas in the UK, you're working with a government-funded system. It's public. They're not necessarily going to hear you more. But what they do have, and I know this to be true, even though they probably won't openly say this, is maybe, and this could be great for your wearable tech. Who knows? Maybe you could get like the NHS to distribute it to. Because it's a
Yeah.
way to keep people out of the clinics. It's like, hey, we don't need you to come in tomorrow because there's a huge line out the front door for the general practitioners, your local GP. Like maybe we can wear the wearable tech and we'll analyze you from afar. Like, well, we have data on you that we can, so, it's kind of, again, the lens that you look at it with, right? It's like, how can you strategically position it as a business case, and equally to help benefit the most amount of people that you can at any given time, right? So
Yeah.
it's a good mission.
I love that idea, like, because it helps to serve also like more patients in a more personalized way, which is what we all want. We also want to be seen and heard. I think, what's so interesting is that there's when we have been up against, pitching our business and trying to build this, no one's debating the possibilities. What they tend to push back on is a patient building a company that doesn't necessarily have the medical insight, right? And I think if you are a patient that has experienced anything, the ability for you to advocate for yourself and to say, here's what I'm actually looking for, and it serves the masses, is a very powerful message. And how can you also get more healthcare and government funding to help with the patient funded companies outside of chronic pain, right? Like mental health is also like a really big issue. But 10 years ago, no one was talking about mental health in the US as much as they are now. So
Yeah.
it's almost, making it the norm to talk and to advocate for yourself. I think it's interesting with what you said about in the US, people want a higher version of care. I would argue that when I've gotten treated over in Ireland, the care was free, but the care was much better at times than I got over here in the States. And I was paying for it. So I think there's also like this, at times, it's hard to get when you have a stable treatment plan or care. It's hard to get that consistently no matter where you go. And it should be universal.
You're right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, like in the UK and Ireland, perhaps, like, it kind of goes back to the human factor. You might just find yourself in front of a good doctor.
Totally.
Like, don't forget the doctors, what they earn, a surgeon, what they earn here in the UK versus what they earn in America. It's the difference between rags to riches. It's like, you might have someone on a 250K salary, and that's on the high end with a doctor here, a surgeon. And then in the US, that guy's 2.5 million on average. So it's like, yeah, different. So it's like, it's not a little bit different. It's a big difference. It's a difference between whether you drive an Audi or a Bentley. It's like, it's a very big life changing, like, so, okay. So when you talk about like how we get it embedded in business in a way that's going to serve the most, what I've noticed? People, they've gone part. You need the apps, you need the software, you need the data bank. That's important. That's the underlying value for real. But what they like to see is the shiny stuff. And it used to be the apps, but now it's not the apps anymore, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry's got an app out there. And everyone's trying to like have the app on the phone, and then maybe a mini app that goes into like the pre-existing wearable tech, like the Apple Watch or the Google, whatever. And it's like, it has something in there that can then kind of be this like sidecar to the motorbike, to the main app, right? So it will track your heartbeat and get feedback information, right? But when I was looking, and you mentioned it, I was looking at your wearable device and what yours is, what you are expecting it to be able to do. It's more than just an app that puts something on a screen. It has the ability to, we said red light. There's some other things that you're planning that actually is providing the wearable tech actually provides treatment in and of itself. Maybe one day it starts injecting for, who knows? But like a little pin pops out. Take that. Here's a little dose. Get rid of your pain. But like, that might be a bit scary actually. So then you've got cyber security stuff to worry about. Like, yeah, but the point is that you have a device that has a more practical use case than an app within another wearable device. So now you have something that I think company like medical institutions, pharmacies, pharmaceuticals, government might actually get behind because they like shiny stuff. All
Yeah.
right. And having a new device that they can put their name to, that they can say is like at the bleeding edge of something, that is beyond just data collection and reporting, and is in fact to do with actual pain management, or in that case, or whatever else that you can get into the actual thing. That could be the thing that could tip it in the right direction for you, because
Totally.
they love to throw money at that. Hey, we'll pilot it over here. So it's about 30 million throw.
We've also made sure that every change that we have done to like development has been based in like customer feedback. So we take pride in the fact that we've spoken to not just research leaders, but over 500 patients from all different walks of life, and understanding what they need in a wearable device and what they need in an app. So like if you go to our app, you will find it's very simple and formed because it's based off of consumer feedback. To your point about government funding, it's interesting because the government, has a lot, at least in the US, has a lot of initiatives right now for healthy alternatives to opioids and pain medication, with the sole intention of trying to say there has to be a better way to help the masses get out there. And how can technology and AI help with that? So I keep reflecting back on your point about like how you can use like AI for your first diagnosis. It could be also a very interesting way to say, like, if you have an opioid use disorder, if you're just trying to get a better way of managing through even like an accident that causes you chronic pain, how can the environment like trigger those pain signals, and how can you avoid them through mild therapeutic technologies that have been on the market for years? And like what we're doing isn't necessarily I don't want to say it's not groundbreaking, because it is groundbreaking in its own way, but we're not discovering a new like cancer strand. We're not figuring out ways to predict different things. We're figuring out a better way to serve the masses that already has, very powerful research and medication and like doctors helping them. And I sometimes think, as someone who is living with this, if you look like you're doing okay, people assume that you are. So like these invisible diseases also need advocacy. And like what we've done is another way to kind of bring it to the table in a new light that brings it back as a conversation starter. Because pain and inflammation impacts people even if they don't look like they're being impacted. And that's where I think it also can get very interesting with clinics and government funding on like, okay, yes, you may be looking okay, but what does your data show, and how can this be stronger for you?
Because you see a lot of people that look very healthy don't look healthy at all.
Yep.
Are in fact, sorry, not healthy at all. Like for example, like there's a lot of people in the fitness space, and you hear that argument all the time. Just because you look like a magazine cover doesn't necessarily mean that everything inside you is at optimal levels, or that you are just generally healthy in good health
Yeah.
generally. And I know that there's a lot of conversations around that that
What's your
float around the
thought?
internet that I've watched. I've certainly watched podcasts on that kind of stuff. But when you talk about grant funding there, I kind of I put some notes down as you were saying that, because I didn't want to lose track. I didn't want to lose those thoughts, because there was another podcast that I had done recently with a guy called Wesley Stevens, and his company is called Quilify, and his company Quilify, it helps with people finding grant funding. And there's thousands of initiatives, like you mentioned, in the US where people can simply, well, they just don't know what's actually available at any given time. And so what Wesley Stevens has done, I'll certainly let him know to maybe contact you about this, to help you maybe walk through his system, because it's relatively new, but it does work really well. He's demonstrated. We did a whole podcast about it. You can check it out. And anyone else for that matter, to access capital from government funding
Mhm.
initiatives. When you think of like places to go and get money, normally it's like a handful of places. Maybe there's a website with a directory, but you never really have a true, and then you read a newspaper or a news snippet later that says, well, there was actually 14 billion available for that. It's like, hang on a sec. I saw like 3 on a bulletin
Yeah.
board. Like, where did this 14 billion? It didn't go into those 3 because they only said they had 150 grand available. So it's like, when you how do you find all of them? Well, his software, AI enabled, by the way, his own AI, not open AI plugin, API plugin, or Gemini. He actually created his own language model. So it's not a large language, but it's his own language model that can basically sift through every available government funding initiative out there. You tell it
Wow.
what it is that you're trying to do, and it will match you with every possible funding initiative that would probably fund your thing,
Yeah. It's
which is
amazing.
pretty cool. So that's me giving him a plug there. But then you have the issue, and this is the discussion I had with him, was then you have the issue of user feedback driving development. Because you talked about how you've built your offering, your service offering as an app, your SaaS, essentially, you're
Yeah.
building whatever it is that you're building on the back of what the community is saying, what your customers are saying, what the people who are in pain are saying, right? This is what they want from the app in terms of its design. This is what they want as far as usability is concerned. They're driving your development, right? And you now want to, but when you have grant funding, sometimes what they'll pay you for is really narrow and not in line with what your user base sometimes wants. And that can cause problem. It can cause friction and difficult, especially when you get multiple grant funding, like multiple streams of grant funding. It's like you now have conflicts at sometimes. Like they'll only pay for this, but you got to go beyond the scope because of that. And then suddenly, do you see where
Yeah.
I'm going with that?
It's kind of like counterintuitive, right? Because as a founder, you're like, well, you want to make something that not just serves you, but serves the masses. And then when you go to these brilliant minds, which after speaking to a few of them, I never realized they were words that were as long as what the people were saying to me. Like so, um, so it's like, well, where's the science? And I'm like, well, the science is in studies that have been conducted. We point to it, and they're, well, no, but where's your science? I'm like, well, our science is based off of the data we got from early adopters, and it's very interesting to hear, well, no, you need to do regulated studies. And then I'm like, yes, we do, but we need help. And that's as like, I do think there's something here with digging into this a little bit more, because as someone who's building, which technically on paper is like a digital health, medical healthcare company, not having the traditional background in the medical field, there are naturally more barriers in proof points of making sure your scientific rigor is correct, but then also you have the right minds behind your company helping you. And in in my book, if I'm able to get the leaders in pain clinics and researchers behind us, which we have, by the way, our ability to get government funding should at least be a little bit higher than someone that doesn't have that. But that's not necessarily the case, because the science might be stronger in some of the other development. So it's a really interesting model, which is so different than business development outside of healthcare, right? Like business development in healthcare, if it's based off research or market insights, you're like, it's a sure win. In healthcare, it's like, yes, there's research and market insights, but then if the science isn't at this certain rigor, it's interesting to see the pushback, even if we get hundreds and thousands of people saying this works. If the science isn't there, sometimes they're still like, well, the science isn't here. This is just a feeling. And how do you
Okay.
bridge
What
the
about
two?
like bringing in like, I'm just thinking like, what if you brought in like non-executive board members, non-executive directors, like so
Yeah.
the professionals that you need with the credentials that you need with the access that you need with the promise of future payments and earnings that they want and recognition that they want, but at the moment you can't offer, but you can say, hey, we're at the beginning of this and we need to leverage you and you to actually help us. So you have like maybe a 10 strong team essentially in the end that can help you break through. But I get it. I mean, you got to leverage credentials, and especially to access the money, because no one's going to throw, like it's hard to get investor money as well to kind of put some rocket fuel under this.
Yeah.
If you
We
don't have that either, it's like that's what an angel would be asking, like, well, let's look at credibility, let's look at all that jazz.
we have a powerhouse team. Like, I am so fortunate for our board of advisors and our medical advisors that are helping pave the way. Like, we have rheumatologists, we have chronic pain experts, we have insurance researchers, engineers. Like, I am really very blessed for the number of people who have jumped on board to support us. I think in healthcare, unfortunately, innovation still takes 10 years. And it's like, how can you get innovation to happen in 5? Um, it's a like government funding is a real it's something that's like the pre-seed investor, right? Like, people are like, oh, if you get government funding, it's like the biggest pre-seed investor. But it is designed by nature to be hard to get, because I think there's a lot of people trying to use AI right now in digital therapeutics, which digital therapeutics isn't something that I have found is always liked because of what you mentioned. There's volatility to it. It's user input. It takes away some functions. And I think at the crux of it, we still need to preserve what has been working, but we need to be able to iterate and grow. And it's been a hard blend. Like, it's my tiny violin of saying it's been a hard blend of trying to meet the credentials, get the scientific rigor, move the business forward. But I think they're good problems to have as we've been
Yeah,
trying to figure it
you're in
out.
the weeds of it, like
We are.
that's it gets stressful. Like, I remind myself, like, when I feel the pressure of like trying to break through, it's like, but I have to remind myself is that this is what I wanted, like,
Mhm.
because I'm in the thick of it now. I'm in the fight. This is what you have. This is the fight. This is you're now dealing with the problem that you chose to fix. Like, this is it.
Yep.
And these are all the challenges that everyone else before you came and had to deal with, and then maybe they quit, and you're going to be the person to get through it all, right? And so, well, you're going to find your niche, like you're going to find your way to elevate out of this where you are right now, which is kind of like you built the thing, you're getting users in, you've got people giving you positive feedback in terms of how it's helping them, you've got this future development plan of the wearable, and now you're kind of breaking through the next level, the next level, the next level, the next level. So what's your what do you do? I mean, look, it's one thing to talk about grant funding, it's one thing to talk about investor money, it's one thing to talk about deployment through a large medical a medical organization, and have it distributed widely. But before that can happen, for you to keep on growing and gaining market share, gaining ground, how do you do it? Do you use are you like leveraging word of mouth through like influencers, affiliates? Are you marketing? Are you relying on like just SEO, SEM, just putting ads out there saying, here's what we do? Are you going to hospitals, speaking to people, just leveraging network effects of individuals who are in pain, communities, that kind of thing? Like, how do you get a product like this where, that's really the question here, is when people think about this, they're thinking, if I were to come and break into the space, like, what would I do to actually access the target user? And so these things are going to be buzzing around everybody's mind. So what do you do?
So, what I have done that has been unique to our company has been, we've utilized NGOs. So think of like Arthritis Foundation, American Chronic Pain Association, and we've said, here's what we're working on. How can we talk to people, get expert reviews, tell you more about what we're working on? And naturally, if you get connected with the right people in the organizations, they share your app, they promote it, and they get you like early data and beta users. We are always looking for like influencers. We do like social media. I will say I am one that's not always inclined to be in front of the camera, but I've gotten more comfortable with that. And, I have had to get really creative with not just spreading the word, but getting development going when we have been bootstrapped to date. So I have a really amazing CTO. His name is Ishmael, and he's helped with the design development of the app as well as thinking through the wearable. But one thing that we recently did is we partnered with a university called Mount Mary University for a capstone like class in the spring, and we had like these senior designers redo a component of our app completely for free, and allowed us to do a coaching and developing session with them. So we also got the benefit of helping the new young minds of design come out into the world, and we got something that we're going to instill in our app. So there are these different ways of partnering with research institutions that are different than what people have been doing traditionally outside of grant funding. It's like, okay, we want to be able to use your bright minds to help drive innovation in our company, but we also want to be able to coach and mentor and give it back. Because I think what's important with when you're building something, even if you're going through affiliates or SEO, like the traction is great, but helping other people understand the purpose, but then also build their own business and build their own path is also something that I think entrepreneurship is at its crux too. Like you're helping your community.
I
And I
believe
have
in that
found
wholeheartedly.
yeah, and helping your community is the word of mouth or the positive feedback that helps you the most. Like, I've gotten a lot of traction by people promoting us and promoting me and what we've been working on, and then I will go back and pay it forward. And I think that is just how you continue to drive yourself and get the momentum. Of course, you do need marketing, right? Like there's no doubt you need people talking about
Absolutely.
it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I believe that like for this, yeah, SEO, SEM, fantastic for this because when people, I think the reason why SEO and SEM work for this specifically, I mean, they work for everything, but I mean, like why it's super important to have this as part of your marketing activity, like really, really optimized for it, is because the benefit to SEO is it will serve up your offer or your opportunity at the moment that someone is searching for a solution to their problem, for that specific problem. They'll say, I have a pain in this. And at the time that they searched it, then you will come up. And that's why it's really useful. And SEM is the same because you're optimizing for keywords, right? So there's the paid and the free, essentially, the organic and the paid, which you have to pay for both of them these days. So it's like, that's super important because that's what, when someone wakes up at 3:30 in the morning and they're tapping their phone, how do I get rid of this pain? Like I've made this query 5,000 times, but I'm making the same query again because I'm looking, maybe there's something new that comes up. And I did that when I had sciatic pain. So I know that it's not just a one and done, one search and it's over. You'll find me when I used to wake up every night, I'd do that. Every time I'd search the same things. How do I get rid of the pain? Hoping to find a different blog, a different comments, another comment in a different community channel or whatever, just to maybe give me that thing, that one little trick that will help me just deal with my issue right now. And so the same search queries happen over and over again. So you have an opportunity there to actually benefit from that. But then equally, you have the influencer side. And when I say influencer, really what I'm talking about is people who have a little audience. I don't mean huge audiences. I mean people who have an audience that is essentially aligned with this. So people who speak to, generally just people, you're trying to leverage word of mouth here. So people who would fit your ideal your profile. So people with this condition that maybe have communities or whatever, and it's like, or people generally people who know people about it. So it's just leveraging as many people as possible to kind of raise awareness to it, so you can touch as many people who have this ailment that you can help with. So I think leveraging that is definitely very important, because it, word of mouth will get people through the door.
Right.
Especially when it comes to this. If someone says, "Hey, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's actually, you're talking about your hand hurting at this time, or this kind of skin irritation popping up with this kind of weather. There was actually something that so and so said or whatever. They're actually, it's word of mouth, right? And so whenever information is provided through word of mouth, you're now more inclined to give it a check, like check it out, try it out. Perhaps I'm more inclined to buy based on that word of mouth recommendation. So that's also, I think, the other very powerful way of doing it. And I think that is, if it's part of your strategy, I think you should double down on it. The other thing I would say is what you just said about leveraging the people, leveraging institutions that have people that could help you. So using like the universities, colleges that have the brain power, the brainiacs, the meatware behind the hardware that you could like apply to your business
Yeah.
on a pro bono basis. That's fantastic too, because when you think about what you're getting that grant funding for, or if it's private sector and you're trying to get investor money for, what are you getting? What are you promising the investor? Or what are you asking the grants for? You're saying, I'm going to try and find people to help build these things out, right? I'm going to find the right brains, the
Yeah.
people to bring into the company. And so what you've just demonstrated there is that you can actually bypass that. So you're now, the bartering tool, which was initially money, has now switched to something else. You're just reframing it, looking at it again through a different lens. You're saying, hey, look, I don't have money for you, but there's an opportunity to work here at the bleeding edge of this tech, and also a way for you to kind of show off your wares, and you can provide, you could create a positive impact in this world, in this space, blah blah blah. Like, you can really leverage different calls to action, as opposed to just saying, hey, I've got some money for you, do you want a job? So I think that's really innovative in a sense that people don't often think that way, even though this is pre-established and companies do this, but not enough people at early stage owner founders usually consider that.
When you're put into like a rock and a hard place, you have to figure out ways to get creative. And this was one, again, through our network, right? That came to be because our network and word of mouth promoted us. And if we didn't have that, I don't know how valuable, or feasible, I should say, the partnership would have been. And, you're absolutely correct with influencers. We're trying to find individuals to help and promote and to try our platform, give feedback. So if anyone's listening and wants to provide, feedback, like, please reach out, because we're always looking for people to try our product. And even if, like, I think the best feedback is, even if it's not positive, it's like, hey, here's what you need to do better for me. That's beautiful too, because we need also the criticism to make it smarter.
Absolutely. And you know what, on that note, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah.
How do people actually speak to you? Because there probably will be people, I know my audience is filled with affiliates, so they're probably like, hey, what's the price tag on this thing? You guys pay a commission? So, because I know, they farm out blogs and access, they'll take care of the SEO for you. Right? So there's that. And then there's also just generally people who are interested in this, who might just want to reach out. Like, okay, there's two questions there. Like, is there a fee for your app? Or how do people access it? How do people get involved with your product offering as it stands at the moment?
Right. So right now there's no fee for the app. We just want people using it and providing feedback. And we say, if you're able to give us a month, we're going to be able to give you the app as it is for free. Right. And then as we grow and develop, we will think through what that means from our base. People can get in touch with me through email. So my email is Caitlin, Caitlin, at For Olivio. So number 4, ALIVIO.com. And then our app, probably when this launches, this will be public. Our app is available in the App Store, in the Google Store.
All right,
So
awesome.
we made sure that it was available in both. So it is open for like what we call like open beta. So anyone can download it, anyone can try it. And if you give feedback, there is a small like gift that we give for providing feedback. So like a little session, like a little
Awesome.
focus group.
All right. Well, listen, I love the mission. I've got some other ideas for you, which I'm going to speak to you about right now, but off camera, because I think that they could also help you. They could help you out. So we're going to have I think you and I are going to continue our discussions, and then also let's hope we can get you back on the podcast. Maybe we put any of those into action. We can talk about how successful or unsuccessful they are. Who knows? But look, thank you so much for coming on. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you.